the waste is generated that's already on here. You have to like make an estimate around that number, 35 or 30, because I kind of use from the graph. It said total materials and products was 176.60, and the weight recovered was 65.25. So I just kind of like predicted it would be like 35, 30 if it's 121 million. So and the weight would generate would be like 30, or something like that.
You getting it?
That's a prediction. I don't know how to do number two.
A specialized recycling center also accepts the electronic waste, such as old laptops and televisions. The weight of electronic waste generated in 2012 was between the waste generated of textiles and wood. What is the most likely weight of electronic waste generated in 2012?
They don't talk about electronic waste in this graph, so that's kind of like hard to.
I mean, but it does.
Oh, textiles and wood. Okay.
So I guess you just add those together. So.
So it was around like
26-ish.
15.26.
Okay.
I would say
Is that up for this? Alright, let's come together. Alright, so I've heard a lot of good conversations as I walked around to Enoch, Ayana, and Marcus's group. So I think one thing that I saw a lot of people doing was going back to the table and making sense of that table. So Andres, if you can pull up the heat map, honey, and let's get started. Phoenix, honey, what did your group come up with so far for 1A? Can you speak up just a little bit, sweetie?
Okay, so we looked at the table where it says the weight generated, and the closest one to 121 was the 176.60, and we just guessed in 30.
Why did you guess a smaller value? Like, why did you guess a value less than 65? Can I have Phoenix answer? I want to hear from her.
Because it's less than the 176, so it could be more than.
Okay, so you're saying 30 million tons. Let's go to Kayla.
I was going to say kind of things that I was confused, but like me and Shemaya tried to make sense of the table. But I had a question for Phoenix.
Great, yeah.
I wanted to know why did she pick the total materials and products, because that's the total of everything. That's not really specific material. It's just total.
I see. Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay. Phoenix, do you have a response, sweetie, to that question?
Well, before I answered that question, I said I was confused. So I never said it was.
Okay, that's fair.
So,
Okay, so Phoenix, I appreciate you putting yourself out there and stating that you're confused. So to Kayla's point, right? Why did she use the total? What are our thoughts there, Greg?
It said a weight generator refers to like all the items and materials discarded as garbage or recycling. So you would use like a percentage or amount, whatever. So like all the materials, not just one specific type of material.
So I'm confused. Are you saying that Kayla, what are you saying then in response to Kayla's?
Like you would use the weight, okay, so the weight generated like 121 millions of tons is it's like for all of the material. It's not for just one specific one. You get what I'm saying?
No. Wanye. But thank you, Greg. I appreciate what you're saying. I don't understand what you're saying though. Wanye.
Okay, so in my group, we were talking about how like the weight is discarded because of the weight discarded plus the weight recovered equals like the weight generated. So then I had a question about like the experiment we did for problem set 4. Was we supposed to go back to the table and then match it up to find the unknown materials?
Sort of. You're using the same skill, but not with necessarily the same data.
No. Okay.
Did that not answer your question, honey? Can you restate your question?
I'm talking about for this table. We're supposed to go back to this, like the total materials and products, like the 176.60. Would that give us the unknown materials?
So you can use that value, not necessarily. I'm hearing people say like, oh, you can't use the value of 176.60 because it represents the total materials in that product, right? So what we're trying to figure out is that a valid data point to use? That's the question I want to keep talking about. Is that a valid data point to use? Layla?
I think it is a valid data point to use. And I say this because, I mean, it's no type of pattern or nothing within the materials and the total materials. And that's like the closest thing that we have to 176 is like the closest thing to have to 121 millions of tons of unknown material. I don't think it would necessarily matter between the total materials and the materials together because the weight recovered and the weight generated isn't really determined off of the material or the total of the materials. I think it's just determined about how much is like in the thing, regardless of its total or if this is a specific material. So we had came up with the same answer around like 35 or 30, and because 121 is like it was just a predicted answer basically.
Yeah.
But I mean it went along with the materials.
So what I'm going to say is that Layla is correct, right? That is a valid data point for us to use as part of the table, even though it's considered an average, right? It helps us see what you were talking about, this idea of a pattern, which I want to go back to in just a second. Now, Phoenix and Maurice's group's estimation of 30 million tons is not necessarily the correct answer, but it is moving us towards the right direction because they talked about how they use the value of 176. So I see lots of thoughts coming out. I want to first ask, are there any questions? Questions? Let's go with Mary.
I'm kind of confused. How do you see 176?
If you go to total materials in products, and you go to the weight generated as 176.6 millions of tons. Any other questions? Is that China back there? Questions, sweetheart?
I was about to ask, like, when we get later into the problem set, is it going to be like the equation that we can like use for better fan, like better fan?
That's a really great question. There is not an equation that you can use in this particular situation. So I think this is what I want us to do before we come back full group. One thing that Diamond's group talked about and one thing that Layla's group touched on was this idea of a pattern or a trend in the data. What I want you to go back to your groups and do is determine, is there any sort of pattern, it's okay, pattern or trend within this data set that we're looking at to answer question 1A. Because even in Marcus's group, they found an answer, but I think there is still a better answer. Okay? Let's take 2 minutes with our groups to determine the pattern or trend.
You want to put it on the ground?
You can do it. Yeah. So I'm just very careful.
Okay.
Alright, so I noticed that there is like when it says weight generated, usually the weight that's generated is weight recovered will be less. So I noticed that, but like other than like you know what I'm talking about?
You saying like the
Okay, basically it's an indirect. I noticed they have an indirect relationship.
yeah.
No, I'm not talking about like that. I'm talking about like compared to weight generated and weight recovered.
That's
As this is, you see how this is high and this is low? Yeah.
Wait, so as this increases,
because when this one, you see how this one is a high number, but this one is always lower than the weight generated. So she basically saying that every time, even though these have high numbers, this is always going to be less than the weight generated. That's basically it.
So it has to be less?
What you mean?
The weight recovered.
Wait, hold on.
I think you follow a pattern of decrease, increase, because for weight cover, like, it's, you did.
Yeah, she
Wait,
is.
come on, say it.
It's 44.36, and then it dropped down to 3.20, and then it goes back up to 5.55. And I also wanted to say that the highest weight generator also has the highest weight. And we see this with paper and paperboard. The weight generator is 68.02, and the weight recovery is 44.36, which is the highest of the weight recovery.
But for weight generated, I don't notice like a increase, decrease, because like it was
They're
at
different
68,
materials.
11, 16, 3 to 20, then it goes to 22, 31, then it just keeps decreasing. Overall, it has a decrease.
I was just talking about the relationship between the weight generator and the weight recovery. But you're right, every time you go down from the weight generator, it's up.
What is your idea of relationship?
The same thing, but if that's the case, then shouldn't the waste recovered be less than 1 to 1 minute?
Cookie. Go ahead, honey. Tell us what you know, honey.
I don't know that much, to be honest.
That's okay. Can you tell us what you do know, sweetie?
The weight recovered and the weight discarded together is just the weight generated. That's what it equals.
Okay, that's good to know. So you figured out that there's a relationship between weight recovered and weight discarded. That's actually really key. Another really good way to look at the data table. Cookie, I want you to call on someone else in the class, not even necessarily someone who has their hand raised, to help us with this idea of the trend.
Of course.
Go ahead, Marcus. No, I want you to talk about the pattern or trend that you see between the weight generated and the weight recovered. Can you speak up just a little bit? 'Cause I don't know if Kyle can hear you in the back.
The smaller the weight generated, like the smaller it goes to recovered because not that much being recovered from.
I'm sorry, I don't really 100% understand what you just said. Can you say that again in different
I
terms?
said the smaller the weight generated is going to be the smaller recovered from.
Can someone please explain what Marcus is saying? Let's go with Ariane.
Okay, so I think he's saying like if the numbers in weight generated are small, then the weight recovered is gonna have a small amount. Like when I was in my group, I said that the ones with weight generated, like ones like 3.58, 7.53, they all have weight recovered that's below 2.0. And then with double digits, like 11.57, they have like weight recovered that's above 2.0.
Cool. Marcus, the feedback that I will give you on your answer, honey, is that you gave me a claim, right? You gave me a statement. The way that I now understand it is because Ariane gave me the evidence.
I got a question.
Right? Question, Layla.
Okay, so the weight recovered and the weight discarded does make up the weight generated, but does the weight generated happen before the weight?
Well, the weight generated is just how much of this waste was generated by people in general in 2012.
Before the weight, before the weight recovered and the weight discarded. So how does the weight? Never mind.
Are you sure?
No, but I'll be alright.
Okay, I think we're gonna come back to your question in a minute. So bell's gonna ring in 3, so I wanna respect your closeout. This is what I want us to do. 1A